네, 안녕하세요. 네, 영어 쉐도잉 14일차 녹화 시작하겠습니다. 저는 지금 매일매일 30분씩 영어 쉐도잉하는 영상을 녹화를 하고 있고요. 추후에 한 100일 정도 이거를 꾸준히 한 다음에 어떻게 제가 영어 실력이 변하는지에 대해서 영상을 편집해서 올릴 예정입니다. 저는 지금 테드 강의를 보고 따라서 쉐도잉 하고 있고, 제목은 Simple Way to Break a Bad Habit, 나쁜 습관을 끊는 쉬운 방법이라는 강의를 따라하고 있습니다. 네, 그러면 오늘도 어김없이 또 쉐도잉 해보겠습니다.
When I was first learning to meditate, the
When I was first learning to meditate,
instruction was to simply pay attention to my breath,
the instruction was to simply pay attention to my breath,
and when my mind wandered, to bring it back.
and when my mind wandered, to bring it back.
Sounded simple enough,
Sounded simple
yet
enough,
I'd sit on these silent retreats,
that I sit on these silent retreats,
sweating through t-shirts in the middle of winter.
sweating through t-shirts in the middle of winter.
I'd take naps every chance I got because it was really hard work.
I take naps every chance I got because it was really hard work.
Actually, it was exhausting.
Actually, it was exhausting.
The instruction was simple enough,
The instruction was simple enough,
but I was missing something really important.
but I was missing something really important.
So why is it so hard to pay attention?
So why is it so hard to pay attention?
Well, studies show that even when we're really trying to pay attention to something,
Where studies show, even when we are really trying to pay attention to something, where studies show, even when we are really trying to pay attention to something, even when we are really trying to pay attention to something, pay attention to something, pay attention to something,
like maybe this talk,
like maybe this thought.
at some point about half of us will drift off into a daydream,
At some point, about half of us will drift off into a daydream,
or have this urge to check our Twitter feed.
or have this urge to check our Twitter feed, or have this urge to check our Twitter feed.
So what's going on here?
So what's going on here?
It turns out that we're fighting one of the most evolutionarily conserved learning processes currently known in science.
It turns out that we're fighting one of the most evolutionarily conserved learning processes currently known in science. It turns out that we're fighting one of the most evolutionarily conserved learning process currently known in science.
One that's conserved back to the most basic nervous systems known to man.
And that's conserved back to the most basic nervous systems known to man. And that's conserved back to the most basic nervous systems known to man.
This reward-based learning process is called positive and negative reinforcement, and basically goes like this.
The reward-based learning process is called positive and negative reinforcement, and basically goes like this. The reward-based learning process is called positive and negative reinforcement, and basically goes like this.
We see some food that looks good.
We see something that looks good.
Our brain says calories, survival.
Our brains say calories, survivors.
We eat the food, we taste it tastes good.
We eat the food, we taste it tastes good,
And especially with sugar,
and especially with the sugar,
our bodies send a signal to our brain that says,
our body sends a signal to our brain that says,
remember what you're eating and where you found it.
remember what you're eating, where you found it.
We lay down this context-dependent memory
We lay down this context-dependent memory
and learn to repeat the process next time.
and learn to repeat the process next time.
See food, eat food, feel good, repeat.
See food, eat food, feel good, repeat.
Trigger, behavior, reward.
Trigger, behavior, reward.
Simple, right?
Simple, right?
Well, after a while, our creative brains say,
After a while, our creative brain says,
you know what? You can use this for more than just remembering where food is.
you can use this just, you can use this for, you can use it, you can use this for more than just remembering where food is. You can use this for more than just remembering where food is. You can use this for more than just remembering where food is.
You know, next time you feel bad,
Next time you feel bad,
why don't you try eating something good so you'll feel better?
why don't you try eating something good so you'll feel better?
We thank our brains for the great idea.
We thank our brains for a great idea. We thank our brains for a great idea.
Try this and quickly learn that if we eat chocolate
Try this and quickly learn that if we chocolate
or ice cream when we're mad or sad, we feel better.
Try it and quickly learn that if we chocolate or ice cream when we're mad or sad, we feel better.
Same process, just a different trigger.
Same process, just a different trigger.
Instead of this hunger signal coming from our stomach,
Instead of hunger signal coming from our stomach,
this emotional signal, feeling sad, triggers that urge to eat.
this emotional signal, feeling sad, triggers the urge to eat.
Maybe in our teenage years,
Maybe in our teenage years,
we were a nerd at school,
we were a nerd at school.
and we see those rebel kids outside smoking, we think, hey,
We see those rebel kids outside smoking, and we think,
I want to be cool, so we start smoking.
hey, I want to be cool, so we start smoking.
The Marlboro Man wasn't a dork, and that was no accident.
And the Marlboro Man wasn't a dork, and that was no accident.
See cool, smoke to be cool, feel good.
Repeat.
Trigger, behavior, reward.
reward.
And each time we do this, we learn to repeat the process.
And each time we do this, we learn to repeat the process. We learn to repeat the process.
And it becomes a habit.
And it becomes a habit.
So later,
later,
feeling stressed out triggers that urge to smoke a cigarette.
urge to smoke a cigarette. So later, feeling stressed out triggers the urge to smoke a cigarette
Or to eat something sweet.
or to eat something sweet.
Now with these same brain processes,
Now with these same brain processes,
we've gone from learning to survive
we've gone from learning to survive
to literally killing ourselves with these habits.
to literally killing ourselves with these habits. To literally killing ourselves, literally killing ourselves with these habits.
Obesity and smoking are among the leading preventable causes of morbidity and mortality in the world.
Obesity and smoking are among the leading preventable causes of morbidity and mortality in the world.
So back to my breath. What if instead of fighting our brains or trying to force ourselves to pay attention,
So back to my breath. What if instead of fighting our brain or trying to force ourselves to pay attention? What if instead of fighting our brain or trying to force ourselves to pay attention,
we instead tapped into this natural reward-based learning process?
we instead tapped into this natural reward-based learning process,
But added a twist.
but added a twist?
What if instead we just got really curious about what was happening in our momentary experience?
What if instead we just got really curious what's happening in the momentary experience?
Tapped into this natural reward-based learning process, but added a twist. What if instead we just got really curious about what was happening in our momentary experience?
Curious about what was happening in the momentary experience. What if instead we just got really curious about what is happening in the momentary experience? What if instead we just got really curious about what is happening in the momentary experience? What if instead we just got really curious about what was happening in the momentary experience?
I'll give you an example.
I'll give you an example.
In my lab, we studied whether mindfulness training could help people quit smoking.
In my lab, we studied whether mindfulness training could help people quit smoking. In my lab, we studied whether mindfulness training could help people quit smoking.
Now, just like trying to force myself to pay attention to my breath,
Just like, just like,
now, just like trying to force myself to pay attention to my breath,
just like trying to force myself to pay attention to my breath,
they could try to force themselves to quit smoking.
they could try to force themselves to quit smoking. They try to force them, they try to force themselves to quit, they try to force themselves to quit smoking. They could try to force themselves to quit smoking.
Just like trying to force myself to pay attention to my breath,
Just like, just like trying to force my, just like trying to force myself to pay attention, to force myself to pay attention to my breath. Just like, just like trying to force my, just like trying to force myself to pay attention to my breath.
they could try to force themselves to quit smoking.
They could try to force themselves to quit smoking.
And the majority of them had tried this before and failed.
And majority of them have tried this before and failed.
On average,
On
6
average
times.
6 times.
Now, with mindfulness training, we dropped a bit about forcing
In mindfulness training, we dropped a bit about forcing
and instead focused on being curious.
and instead focused on being curious. And instead focused on being curious.
In fact, we even told them to smoke.
In fact, we even told them to smoke.
What? Yeah, we said, go ahead and smoke.
What we said, go ahead and smoke.
Just be really curious about what it's like when you do.
Just be really curious about what it's like when you do.
And what did they notice?
And what did they notice?
Oh, here's an example from one of our smokers.
Here's an example of one of our smokers.
She said, mindful smoking smells like stinky cheese and tastes like chemicals.
Yeah.
Yuck. Now, she knew cognitively that smoking was bad for her.
Now she knew cognitively that smoking was bad for her.
That's why she joined our program.
That's why she joined our program. That's why she joined our program.
What she discovered just by being curiously aware when she smoked
What she discovered just by being curiously aware when she smoked
was that smoking tastes like shit.
was that smoking tastes like shit.
Now, she moved from knowledge to wisdom. She moved from knowing in her head that smoking was bad for her
She moved from knowing in her head that smoking was bad for her
to knowing it in her bones.
to knowing it in her bones.
And the spell of smoking was broken.
The spell of smoking was broken. The spell of smoking was broken.
She started to become disenchanted with her behavior.
She started to become disenchanted. She started to become disenchanted with her behavior.
Now, the prefrontal cortex, that youngest part of our brain from an evolutionary perspective,
Now, the prefrontal cortex, that youngest part of our brain from an evolution perspective. Now, the prefrontal cortex, the youngest part of our brain from an evolutionary perspective. Now, the prefrontal cortex, the youngest part of our brain from an evolutionary perspective. Evolutionary perspective. Now, the prefrontal cortex, that youngest part of our brain from an evolutionary perspective.
it understands on an intellectual level
It understands on an intellectual level
that we shouldn't smoke.
that we should smoke.
And it tries its hardest to help us change our behavior.
And it tries its hardest to help us change our behavior. And it tries its hardest to help us change our behavior.
To help us stop smoking, to help us stop eating that.
To help us smoking to help us stop eating the
second,
second,
that
the
third,
third,
that
the
fourth
fourth
cookie.
cookie.
We call this cognitive control. We're using cognition to control our behavior.
We call this cognitive control. We're using cognition to control our behavior. We call this cognitive control. We're using cognition to control our behavior.
Unfortunately, this is also the first part of our brain that goes offline when we get stressed out.
Unfortunately, this is also the first part of our brain that goes offline when you get stressed out,
Which isn't that helpful.
which isn't the helpful.
And we can all relate to this in our own experience.
We can all relate to this. We can all relate to this in our own experience.
We're much more likely to do things like yell at our spouse or kids when we're stressed out or tired, even
When you get stressed out, tired,
though we know it's not going to be helpful.
even though it's not gonna be helpful. We're much more likely to do things like yell at our spouse or kids when we get stressed out or tired, even though we it's not, even though we, even though we know it's not gonna be helpful, even though we know it's not gonna be helpful. We're much more likely to do things like yell at our spouse or kids when you're stressed out or tired, even though we know it's not gonna be helpful.
First part of our brain that goes offline when we get stressed out, which isn't that helpful.
It's not helpful.
And we can all relate to this in our own experience. We're much more likely to do things like yell at our spouse or kids when we're stressed out or tired,
When we're stressed out, tired, when we're stressed out or tired, when we're stressed out or tired,
even though we know it's not going to be helpful.
even though we know it's not gonna be helpful, even though we know it's not gonna be helpful,
We just can't help ourselves.
we just can't help ourselves.
Now, when the prefrontal cortex goes offline, we
Now, when the prefrontal cortex goes offline,
fall back into our old habits,
we fall back into our old habits,
which is why this disenchantment is so important.
which is why this disenchantment is so important.
Seeing what we get from our habits helps
Seeing what we get from our habits
us understand them in a deeper level.
help us understand them on a deeper level. Help us understand them at a deeper level. Help us understand them at a deeper level. Understand them at a deeper level.
To know it in our bones, so
To know it at a bone.
we don't have to force ourselves to hold back or restrain ourselves from
We don't have to force out. We don't have.
understand them in a deeper level. To know it in our bones, so we don't have to force ourselves to hold back or restrain ourselves from behavior.
We don't have to force ourselves to hold back. We don't have to force ourselves to hold back or restrain ourselves from behavior. We don't have to force ourselves to hold back or restrain ourselves from behavior. We don't have to force ourselves to hold back or restrain ourselves from behavior.
We're just less interested in doing it in the first place.
We're just less interested in doing it in the first place.
And this is what mindfulness is all about.
And this is what mindfulness is all about. This is what mindfulness is all about.
Seeing really clearly what we get when we get caught up in our behaviors.
Seeing really clearly what we get when we get caught up in our behavior.
Becoming disenchanted on a visceral level.
Becoming disenchanted on a visceral level.
And from this disenchanted stance, naturally letting go.
And from this disenchanted stance, naturally letting go.
This isn't to say that poof, magically we quit smoking, but over time as we learn to see more and more clearly the results of our actions,
But over time, as we learn to see more and more clearly the results of our actions,
we let go of old habits and form new ones.
we let go of our habits and form new ones. But over time, as we learn to see more and more clearly the results of our actions, we let go of our habits and form new ones.
The paradox here is that mindfulness is just about being really interested in getting close and personal with what's actually happening in our bodies and minds from moment to moment.
The paradox here is that mindfulness training is just about being in interesting in getting close and personal with what's actually happening in our bodies and minds from moment to moment. The pa- the paradox here is that mindfulness training is just about being interested in close getting close and personal with what's actually happening in our bodies and minds from moment to moment.
This willingness to turn toward our experience rather than trying to make unpleasant cravings go away as quickly as.
Rather than trying to make unpleasant cravings go away. This willingness to turn toward our experience rather than trying to trying to make unpleasant cravings go away as quickly as possible.
Possible. And this willingness to turn toward our experience
And the willingness to turn toward our experience
is supported by curiosity,
is supported by curiosity,
which is naturally rewarding.
which is naturally rewarding.
What does curiosity feel like?
What does curiosity feel like?
It feels good.
It feels good.
And what happens when we get curious?
And what happens when you get curious?
We start to notice that cravings are simply made up of body sensations.
We start to notice that cravings are simply made up of body sensations. We start to notice that cravings are simply made up of body sensations.
Oh, there's tightness, there's tension, there's restlessness.
Oh, there's tightness. Oh, there's tightness. Oh, there's tension. There's restlessness.
And that these body sensations come and go.
And these body sensations come and go.
These are bite-sized pieces of experiences
These are bite-sized pieces of experience
that we can manage from moment to moment,
that we can manage that we can manage from moment to moment,
other than getting clobbered by this huge, scary craving that
rather than rather than getting clobbered by huge this huge scary craving
we choke on.
that we choke
In
on.
other words,
In other words,
when we get curious,
when you get curious,
we step out of our old fear-based reactive habit patterns
we step out of our old fear-based fear-based based fear-based fear-based habit patterns.
and we step into being.
We step into being.
We become this inner scientist
We become this inner scientist
where we're eagerly awaiting that next data point.
where we're eagerly awaiting the next data point.
Now,
Now,
this might sound too simplistic to affect behavior,
now, this might sound too simplistic to affect behavior,
but in one study we found that mindfulness training was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking.
In one study, we found that we, it, mindfulness training was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking. In one study, we found that mindfulness training was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking. In one study, we found that mindfulness training was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking.
So it actually works.
So it actually works.
And when we studied the brains of experienced meditators,
And we studied the brains of experienced meditators. And when we study the brains of experienced meditators,
we found that training was twice as good as gold standard therapy
twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking.
So it actually works.
So it actually works.
And when we studied the brains of
And
experienced
when we study the brains of experienced
meditators, we found
meditators,
that parts of a neural network
we found that parts of neural network
of self-referential processing
of self-referential processing of self-referential processing
called the default mode network or
called the default mode network or
Play.
play.
Now, one current hypothesis is
One current hypothesis is
that a region of this network
that the region of
called the posterior cingulate cortex
brains called the posterior cingulate cortex. One current hypothesis is that the region of brains called the posterior cingulate cortex
is activated not necessarily by craving
is activated by not necessarily craving itself,
itself, but when we get caught up in it,
but when we get caught up in it,
get sucked in, and it
when we get sucked in it,
takes us for a ride.
it takes us for a ride.
In contrast, when we let go,
In contrast, when we let go,
step out of the process
step out of the process,
just by being curiously aware of what's happening,
just by being curiously aware of what's happening,
this same brain region quiets down.
this same brain region quiets down.
Now we're testing app and
Now we're testing app and
online-based mindfulness training program
online-based mindfulness training program
that target these core mechanisms.
that target these core mechanisms.
And ironically, use
Ironically,
the same technology that's driving us to distraction
use the same technology that driving us to distraction
to help us step out of our unhealthy habit patterns of
to help us step out of unhealthy habit patterns
smoking,
of smoking,
stress eating, and
of stress eating,
other addictive behaviors.
and other addictive behaviors.
Now remember that bit about context-dependent
Now remember that bit about context-dependent
memory?
memory.
We can deliver these tools
We can deliver these tools
to people's fingertips
to people's fingertips
in the context that
in the context
matter most.
that matter most.
So we can help them tap into
So we can help them tap into
their inherent capacity
their inherent capacity
to be curiously aware right
to be curious aware, right
when that urge to smoke
when the urge to smoke
or stress eat
or stress eat,
or whatever arises.
whatever arises.
So if you don't smoke or stress eat,
So if you don't smoke or stress eat,
maybe the next time you
maybe the next time
feel this urge to check your email when
you feel the urge to check your email
you're bored or
when
you're
you're bored
trying to distract yourself
or you're trying to distract yourself from
from work, or maybe to compulsively
respond
to that text message when
that text message
you're driving.
when you're driving.
See if you can tap into
See if you can tap into
this natural capacity. Just
this natural capacity.
be curiously aware of what's happening
Just be curious aware of what's happening
in your body and mind in that moment.
in your bodies and minds in your at the moment.
It will just be another chance to
It will just be another chance
perpetuate one of our endless
to perpetuate one of our endless
and exhaustive habit loops,
and exhaustive habit loops,
or step out of it.
or step out of it.
Instead of see text message,
Instead of see text message,
compulsively text back,
compulsively text back,
feel a little bit better.
feel a little bit better,
Notice the urge.
notice the urge,
Get curious.
get curious,
Feel the joy of letting go,
feel the joy of letting go,
and repeat.
now repeat.
Thank you.
Thank you. 네, 오늘 14일차 연습이 끝났습니다. 그러면 다음 시간에 뵙도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.